Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are dialing in from. My name is Sumair Sayani. I am the global head of AI products and strategic partnerships at QuestionPro, and I'm joined today by the amazing Louise Keely. Let me quickly introduce Louise. Louise leads Bain's advanced analytics practice with over 25 plus years of experience in customer strategy and data science, focusing on retail and consumer sectors. She advises large enterprises on data strategy, AI, and business growth. She's a former professor and an industry leader. She holds a PhD from the London School of Economics and is a noted speaker on consumer trends and analytics around the world. Louise is also a friend, and I'm lucky to be able to call her a friend and someone I've had the pleasure of working with on some groundbreaking projects of global importance. And hopefully looking forward to doing some other amazing things in the future together as well. Louise, welcome to your first, I think, QuestionPro webinar. How are you? How are you doing today?
Thank you. Thank you, Sumair, for that lovely introduction. I'm doing well. I'm in Chicago, and it's a beautiful, sunny, warm day. So,
Did you go for your run yet? Or
I didn't go for a run. My ankles are not cooperating. I went for a bike ride this morning, though. So yeah.
Oh, nice. I just did my 10K just before this.
Oh wow. Okay.
Feeling good about it.
Yeah. Great.
All right. So now the topic is obviously it's a hot cake, right? It's a hot cake topic. It's of great interest to many folks in the inside industry, and that also goes to show the number of people who have registered for this webinar, the number of people who have shared questions before. So obviously, it's very timely, I would say, to have this conversation and continue to have this conversation. But here's the thing, right? The flip side is that this topic has been talked about a lot. So I'm hoping that together we can hopefully bring or give kind of a new perspective of, I would not say a fresh perspective, but at least clarify a little bit, what is happening and how should we kind of deal with it in, going forward. So some of those areas I think we're going to go a little bit deeper into. Before we jump into it, and I'm not going to take much time, just very quick, some housekeeping stuff. So as I said, some participants have already shared their questions with us, so we'll try to take them as we go. Folks who are live with us, you guys can also ask questions. My colleague Marisol, who's helping us out throughout this whole process, will pass on these questions to me during the course. So yeah, as I said, we'll either try to get them during the session as we were talking, Louise and I, or we'll try to have them addressed at the end. I also want to highlight one thing clearly. I think it's important based on some of the questions that I saw. That some colleagues and folks who have asked questions before are looking for some very specific information, like which tool to use for this problem and so on and so forth. So we may or may not get to that in this conversation because we want to try to keep it at a level which is more about how the industry is shaping, how it is evolving, and what should be done from a strategy perspective, or at least from very specific actions perspective. But we can always connect after it, and I can try to come back to you with answering those kind of questions if you can. All right, Luis. Now I know that you are great at looking into the future. The work that you did at the Demand Institute, which is kind of forecasting consumer demand in the years to come. So obviously you know how to do that. But we have a bit of a challenge on our hands when it comes to AI and market research, right? As William Gibson said, that while the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed, right? So we are seeing a lot of different places and different ways in which companies are stacking up right now in terms of their options. So we're going to unpack that a little bit. But let me start by painting a scenario for you, and then ask you, a question about the time zone in which do you think this could potentially be reality. Okay. So let's say a brand launches a new product, and within minutes, AI systems around the world have already predicted its success or failure, identified its ideal audience, and conducted the research and written the next 6 months of marketing strategy, all without a single survey or focus group actually happening. Now, my question to you is, do you think do you see this year in which this is happening? Is it 2025? Is it 2028? Somewhere in between, or later?
Or not at all.
Or not at all.
Yeah. So I would say that scenario of literally no human being queried as part of the market research certainly is not today in 2025. And I'm not sure it will be in 2028 or ever. And the reason is not that we couldn't do that, because we could do that even today. But I think there are a few reasons why we won't. We won't in the near term, and we may never fully automate the way we do customer research in the way that you described. First, there's a couple of reasons. First is, today, I would say even if we could do it, which, as I said, we could do certain types of research in this way. There isn't the confidence or proof, if you will, that the results will be of sufficient quality and fidelity that they would be reliable and usable. So we're still in the early innings of automating research in the way that you described. The second reason is that even if these capabilities exist, the scenario that you described would require a dramatic change in the way that research and insights functions operate, and the way people work and do their jobs in research and insights organizations. And often the people side of change due to AI capabilities is the thing that is maybe not the barrier, but is, it's part of the process of change that needs to happen, and it takes more time. I think there's often also siloed parts of an organization that would be using these tools in the way that you described. I mean, an insights organization, a product innovation team, a marketing team, these are usually different teams. And so this vision of kind of being able to build a new concept, a new product concept, build a new product, take it to market, in the orchestration of that all with AI, that would require not just different people working differently within these teams, but also people working across these teams in different ways, or reorganizing these teams. And then finally, I think I would just say this isn't the vision that I think we should be thinking about isn't one of just AI systems doing all the work, and without a human being queried from a research perspective. I also would say that we should be thinking about humans in the loop always in the interpretation of the results. And this isn't just from research and insights, but in general, when we look at the way AI is being used across different functions of enterprises, the human is still critical for orchestrating AI tools, for curation, for assessment, for taking decisions. AI, generally speaking, takes time out of processes. It can take the burden of certain types of manual activities off of people. It can lead to better leveraging of bodies of data or information we have to inform things like product development, marketing campaigns, et cetera. But the AI tool is unlikely, in my view, to be making product marketing decisions at any time in the near future, and maybe at all.
It's interesting you say that, because just recently, I think yesterday, this report came out from JP Morgan Chase, which talked about that, whilst we are seeing some inertia somewhere, more recently, I think we see this plethora of adoption, right? Of usually, simpler to adopt Gen AI, GPT-based kind of tools, and they're kind of cautioning the fact that without fully understanding what you're adopting, how does it work, how does it give out the results that it does, especially in the financial sector, but generally I think this could be applicable to all the different industry, is the cost of that is going to be significant. They're estimating big number, but it makes sense. And I think so. What you're saying is that because the fact that there will always be this notion of lack of clarity of how these systems still actually work, even though they've gotten a lot better, even though the adoption has improved. This phenomena is going to keep keep pushing the fact that there's always needs to be a human in the loop in different stages.
Right. Well, and not understanding how the models work is, I mean, it may that in itself may or may not be an issue. One of the challenges with that is if we don't completely understand how the models are working, that can itself be a barrier to adoption, because people say, well, if we don't understand how this thing works, how can I possibly adopt it? But then also there's just the more kind of practical consideration of, testing the tool and seeing what the results are and getting confident that, yes, this is giving me results that I can rely on. But there's a lot of research being done right now to get a better handle on understanding how these models work, what they're capable of, what they're not capable of, and how they're coming up with ideas or answers, etc. And so I expect that our understanding of these models will improve significantly, given that there is a research focus on that question now.
So just a short while ago, I put together this checklist of things that market research, folks who are looking for third-party solutions around AI adoption. What should they be looking for? What should they be checking when they, procure AI solutions from third-party vendors? And I think the challenge then becomes where we are seeing, putting you a scenario to, right, which is a practical scenario, which I've seen. And then I'm going to circle back to this question that I'm trying to get to.
Yeah.
It's the question around speed versus depth, right? Or speed versus accuracy. So imagine you are a decision maker today and you are faced with this question of getting something faster, insights faster, but let's say 75, 80% accuracy, versus or depth, a few of insights, versus very accurate, 95% accuracy, but much slower. Where do you see the balance sits right now, in your view? What you're seeing across organizations? Are we going more towards fast, but fine if it's not that perfect, but at least it's quicker, versus people still, kind of favoring those older ways of doing research, which takes considerably long time?
Right. So the way I would frame it is in terms of maybe instead of thinking about accuracy, there's a trade-off between speed and kind of I'll call it like reliability or variability. And what I mean by that is we might do research that's enabled somehow by AI, and we could talk about specific use cases for that. And we will come up with an answer to a question, and we might, and with any answer, right, there's some kind of range of like what the answers could have been, or what kind of reliability. I mean, in statistics, we would talk about a confidence interval or something like that. So I think if we think about the trade-off as kind of speed versus variability or reliability, it's the answer, I think, is going to be the same as it always has been, which is the need for reliability or kind of preciseness depends on the decision. If this is something that's going to sink the business, if we make the wrong decision, then you probably need to do not just necessarily like traditional market research, but probably more research, right? And explore, do different types of research, different types of analysis. But generally, when we do market research, when we do insights development, we're rarely, we know we're wrong part of the time. We know, but it's always, it's a question of like, how wrong are you, and how important is it to get something exactly right versus to just kind of get a decision out to the market. And so I think in general, conditional on some minimal standard of reliability, we would pick a faster solution. So it's more like you want to get to a certain threshold given the decision you want to make of reliability. And then once you've done that, gotten to that minimum threshold, then you want to pick something that's faster, if you can. And because there's also just the practical consideration of budget pressures on things like insights organizations, right? There's usually more demand than there is resources to answer insights related questions. There's going to be a push toward doing things faster and therefore at lower cost if possible.
And I think some of the work, I think, again, going back to what JP Morgan Chase put out, the checklist that I referred to. So I'm kind of now coming back to that.
Yeah.
And a question or a comment just came in that, from Andrew Gordon, that why don't, if we use first party data to kind of train your environment, wouldn't that increase reliability per se? So there is a bit of this,
Sure.
An ecosystem assessment work, right? How are we using it? What decisions are we making with it? How the models are built? If this work is done diligently beforehand or on a continuous basis, then you can argue that, okay, then you can actually start to move faster, without using AI, without really necessarily feeling that there is really a trade-off in situation, because you've done the due diligence.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And in fact, I should have said that ideally, right, we won't face that trade-off, because as we think about, for a couple of reasons, right, if we're talking specifically about using like AI driven insights, if we're able to use data to deliver those insights that we didn't have access to before. So I'm thinking about unstructured data, right? I'm thinking about product reviews or social media, or even being able to use long form answers from surveys or other type of market research to inform the insights in a much more efficient way than was possible before because of transformer models. Then we should see not only faster results, but potentially higher quality, or even just new insights that we just didn't have before. For example, being able to more closely link behaviors with underlying motivation to understand why a behavior took place. So yeah, I think, maybe the answer is yes, we're going to be looking to do things faster, and eventually not just according to some minimum threshold of quality or reliability, but actually breaking through that trade-off.
So I think what the takeaway here is that look at and see, we will talk a little bit more about it, Louise, what are the building blocks of a robust AI ecosystem for an insights function?
Yep.
Right. So how can you create an ecosystem that then you can trust that it could move fast and produce more reliable results, right? So what are those building blocks? I think, and again, going back to this notion which you're going to have handled at the end, what insights function should be, spending their times on, and the leadership should be doing today. I think this is going to be one of those things that probably we will highlight, that this should be done and how to do it, right? Because every decision is different, every ecosystem is different, every organization has access to different kinds of data and different expertise, and this is not something that is the core expertise of an insights function or an organization. So how do you leapfrog into adoption or into building this capability without really necessarily spending ages doing it, and doing it smartly, not just a version of GPT, which is
right.
not really AI. Okay, so let me kind of go back to some of the kind of laying some basic foundations, Louise, in this conversation, and then we can kind of move forward, talking more about the little bit nuts and bolts of the how do we go about this. So over 90% of the world's data, as it said, is created in the last couple of years, right? So when we talk about things are gonna, humans are gonna stay, things are not gonna change, we're kind of also looking behind. Whereas, the way the things are changing is very, very fast. Traditional market research methods were kind of built for a trickle of data.
Yeah.
Now we are drowning with data, right? So
Right.
it seems that AI isn't just automating research processes. It seems in a lot of ways it's redefining how market research is done, actually, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how it can be done. We're also seeing, astronomical kind of enhancements in the LLMs, compute time costs, DeepSeek and everything kind of coming through, and there's going to be more.
Right.
So, in your view, kind of, what are the most exciting applications of AI and insights function that you are watching right now, that you are seeing, which is exciting in your opinion?
Well, so so I'm going to answer your question of what's the most exciting to me, but I'm also, sometimes I worry that not just for market research and insights folks, but for people across different parts of an enterprise, that this idea of like, okay, AI is going to change everything, and how do I start, can be really overwhelming. And we see this in, there's a lot of discussion right now about, there's a lot of experimentation going on, but it's very hard to productize and scale. And so very tactically, how do I see AI changing the way market research is done now? And what are we seeing? And then within that, what is most exciting? If we think about kind of the value chain of market research, right? This is a little bit of an oversimplification, but there's kind of the development of the research kind of approach and content. There's executing the research, and then there's developing the insights, right? And so very simply, right? If I were running a market research organization, or an insights organization, I would think about in the kind of research scoping and development, I might use ChatGPT to come up with ideas of, if it was like a new product, like new products, to just in ChatGPT. It's actually pretty good for idea generation, I would argue. You can also do things like automate survey, or partially automate survey writing or interview guide development, because you can take like the corpus of data that you have from old surveys, and you can work with a GPT to help you develop a survey or interview guide in a semi-automated way. So you're using that information more effectively, and you're taking out some of the manual elements of survey and interview guide design. So those are a couple of simple use cases for that kind of scoping and research approach creation phase. Then when it comes to actually building the insights, we're seeing this first and foremost in qualitative, and there's a couple different ways it's happening. One is we see, for example, bots moderating focus groups, and there are vendors out there that are doing this, right? So you don't have to kind of create this yourself internally. You can work with a third party if you want to, and there are bots out there doing the moderating. Now, to be honest, like, I haven't actually worked with one of these myself, but I've seen demos of them, and I would argue that in general, I would expect bots to do a reasonably good job, because bots are being considered not just for focus group moderation, but for things like therapy and health coaching. And so, and if you think about a bot, or an agent, I use that word loosely, to do a focus group, this is going to be something that will be patient, will listen. It doesn't, it's not gonna like miss part of the conversation. It takes in all of the information that's provided. You can always have a human sitting behind, also like co-moderating also almost. And then there's also using within that insights generation kind of stage. There's also kind of on the flip side instead of having a bot, say, moderating a focus group, you can also have what we call synthetic customers, which are representations of customers that are being queried instead of talking with an actual respondent. Now, I'm not suggesting that we should be at a point where we've got bots talking to bots. I'm not suggesting that. It's one or the other. And then the third stage, kind of where you're bringing the research together, you're developing insights, then there's kind of simple ways that you can synthesize text from focus groups or from a long form answer in a survey, from images or video that customers create, right? There's this ability to synthesize unstructured data in a much more efficient way than was ever possible before. And so those are some ways that research and insights organizations can get started using AI in their workflows and trying things out, and then eventually standardizing. And among those, the synthetic customers is the most exciting to me, right? This is where I spend some of my time looking at the research and doing some R&D work to see to what extent can we build representations of customers that we can query can we build new types of segmentation using unstructured data? Can we test and optimize new value propositions? Can we test marketing campaigns using these synthetic customers so that we can both do more, build more insights, but also build it more quickly and also more dynamically with more iteration than you can do in traditional market research. And all of these things are already happening, by the way. Like none of this is pie in the sky. Like all of this is possible today.
So let me again so we are talking about again the need for speed, automation, cost effectiveness, productivity, but you like to write. I have a copy of your A Tale of 2000 Cities, which I think is a great report. If you were to say, let's say, write at some point of time about about how insights function changed or adopted AI or evolved with AI, what do you think would be the most important drivers that would be identified as the key catalysts for them, the speed of adoption or the extent of adoption within the insights function? And I'm just going to add one more to this. Do you think ROI featured at this list? And if yes, then I'll have some follow-up question on ROI of AI as well.
Well, so I think ROI will be at the heart of any changes, and it should be. And so, for example, being able to do, as I mentioned, more research with the same resources, or even fewer resources. Being able to leverage new data to be able to generate better insights, to be able to use the body of data. If you're an insights function and you're sitting on years of surveys and years of customer research, that is a valuable resource that heretofore has not really been accessible, and now it is. I also think that and this is back to our earlier point, that it should be like the return on investment with fewer resources, better quality insights. But I also think that the insights kind of function and the jobs to be done could become more fun, because some of the manual work that's involved in insights and market research will go away for humans. It'll be done by the AI tools. And what's left should be the things that are related to critical thinking and judgment and orchestration and being able to do more of that work. And that will, as I said, it will make the job more enjoyable. It will also mean that having expertise in what market research is and does and its potential, having expertise around an understanding of the business decisions that are being informed by the research and insights will also, it was always important, but it'll be increasingly critical for humans to, and possible for humans to focus on those pieces of their job, because again, the manual stuff will, at least to some extent, will go away.
So, I mean, like a nice segue into what you just said, and talking about the drivers. If I were to ask you, who really controls the future of AI in market research? Its adoption, the speed and extent, and the governance of it and everything. Is it the researchers? Is it the stakeholders who are demanding faster insights and more cost effectiveness? Or is it the actual end customers who want better, faster, response, actions, products, and also maybe they're sick of doing service at some point in time. So, who do you think would be the most important catalyst, or is the most important driver of adoption of AI right now? And if you
I think
talk more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to the point that I made at the beginning of the conversation. I think the answer is that it's going to be the leaders of research and insights organizations. They will be the most important enablers or preventers of incorporating AI tools into market research. I mean, and customers, both end consumers doing surveys as well as the consumers of insights in a business setting, they may push for some of this. Modelers will enable it. The technology will enable it. But this is ultimately about people's jobs change. No, maybe not ultimately, but it's at least partly about people's jobs changing and the way they work changing. And that has organizational implications. And so it will be the leaders of these groups, of these functions, that will take a decision to use AI, how it's going to be used, and then also do the hard work of helping their teams to change the way they work, and sometimes even reskilling or changing the composition of the teams. And I'm not necessarily talking about like headcount reduction. It could literally be people changing what they do day to day, because the teams are suddenly able to do much more in terms of delivering insights than ever before. But they have to work in a different way. So I think it comes down to the people.
I completely agree with you, Louise. In fact, I was talking to somebody who leads qualitative research at a large agency, a market research agency, and I said to her that in my view, as more AI adoption, will happen, the value of real human insight is going to, increase multifold, because we want to make sure that we maintain and represent real human voices in data. And so, that notion will not go away. Now, how are we going to hear it? How are we going to analyze that voice? How are we going to have it represented? That process will definitely shift and change from what it is today. But in essence, that human voice is critical in research going forward, because we cannot lose that. And as you said, bots should not be talking to bots. Synthetic data should not be producing more synthetic data.
Right.
But we cannot, obviously, if we need to talk about this topic a little bit more. A question has come in as well. I know people do ask this question a lot. There's a lot of confusion as well. Okay, because there's so much happening. What should I be doing? So let's first take a little bit of a view on, at least your perspective on, how are you seeing this insights functions transforming from a people perspective? What kinds of roles do you think are not gonna be there, and what should people should start to do, right? When you talk about upscaling, what does that really mean in terms of, should it be something that an organization should take responsibility for? Is it more of an individual? And where should they really go for this? To go about doing this, if you may. I know I'm not asking for a specific, like a activity log that this is what you should do,
Right.
step one,
Right.
step two, step three,
Right.
but
Right.
what should we do tomorrow to keep
Right. So okay. So a couple things. So first a comment, which is, I think we all would agree that this is, this is market research, it's customer insights. There has got to be a human element, and that human input and response always needs to be there. People's preferences are changing all the time, right? So there will always be a need to bring in new information about actual human reaction, response, behavior to inform insights. That's not going to go away. Secondly, I would argue that within an insights organization, that there will be a need for human expertise. With most AI applications, what we're seeing, the uses are about augmentation, not automation. In other words, it is supporting the human, it is not replacing the human. And we will still need expertise around how to build and assess and use these tools in market research and insights. And I think there will be new capabilities to build and incorporate these tools into workflows. I think AI tools may ultimately almost be like a member of the team, essentially, or members of the team. So in terms of what people can do to get started, I mean, it kind of depends on where they are. But I mean, one thing would be, if you're not using, like, if you're not using one of the GPTs in your work and in your life as kind of a research assistant, a writing assistant, you need to try that. That needs to happen now. And you don't have to, you have to be careful about what information you put into it and all that kind of stuff if it's not an enterprise version of the tool. But the way to get started is to get started. It's not hard. You can pull up the GPT, and you can, whether it's Chat GPT or Claude or what have you, and just start interacting with it and seeing what it can do. You have to continue to use your judgment. I think there can be using the tool as an assistant in your work or in your life can lead to some degree of intellectual laziness, I'll call it. So I would just caution against that. Like, think of it, it's a support, it is not a replacement, and it will sometimes give you things that you just look at and you just think this is wrong, or this is not what I wanted. And so, and then the other thing too is I would just, there's a lot of content out there about companies that are doing work in this space, that are building tools, that are experimenting. I mean, you have to kind of just be intellectually curious and go out and read, start with a Google search and start reading, or ask other people who who are in the profession, hey, have you come across any interesting companies that are, doing market research and insights using AI? We've mentioned a few of the use cases in this discussion, so you can, there are companies doing that. And just, and then depending on what's appropriate for your organization, maybe start working with or trying, piloting something with one or more of these vendors, or just going and talking with them at least to start.
Yeah, so you're exactly right. Just as we said, right, from the data side, we cannot lose the real human voice. We also cannot lose the real human on the other end of it, right, which is the analysis and the reporting. And what I think what you and I are saying is, be human. When you are, the value of the human is there because you have experiences that a machine can never have. You understand context, nuances, culture that machines do not yet, at least. So when you say be a human, which means don't just sit in front of the machine and try these GPT models, actually go out there, live your real, and this is what I tell my kids too, by the way, that live your real experiences, real life, because that context of real experience, real world experience with real humans is irreplaceable, right? And as you said, read as well with the critical thinking, original thought is going to be even more important going forward. So
Right.
So I think the more we become, the more we live as humans, the better we're going to be in AI, in the world of AI, I think,
Right.
to analyze the data.
I mean, it's a model just like any other model, right? We use models in market research all the time. This is not an unfamiliar concept, right? So, and we know that models are representations of a person, of a setting, of a situation, and it is a model. It is not complete. There is context that is missing, and this is no different. So that need for expertise and context and interpretation was always there. You know, market research has always been art and science. It is not just, statistical modeling, for example. And that will continue to be the case. If anything, I think that expertise becomes even more important, because as these models become more powerful, it can be a little bit deceptive. They can look to be better than they really are. I'll put it that way. And that is why actually research shows that when humans are working with these tools, actually people who are the greatest experts in their field tend to get the most value out of these tools, because they have the ability to make good judgment about what is useful and what is not, and also interact more effectively with these tools.
Yeah, and to your point, in fact, there's a report that came out that, the notion that the more data you feed to an AI model or to a foundational model like GPT and LLMs, your hallucination levels and everything is going to improve. That's exactly not the case. In fact, there have been cases where it feels that there's a lot of data that was fed, and the hallucination level actually reached a tipping point, and then it started to increase. It did not improve with a lot of data. So, again, that human judgment, which comes with experience, is going to be critical along this process, in that journey. So be human. And if you are looking for some very, very specific skills, programs or training, then we have a friend. Both Louise and I know this person who started this, and he's also a QuestionPro partner, by the way, called SkillsBridge AI. Piyush started that. Piyush Mathur. So if you're looking for very specific skill sets that you are lacking to grow, and you can go to that to skillsbridge.ai. Very soon you'll be able to do it through QuestionPro platform, and basically make an assessment and figure out what specific skills you need. So there you go. That's also an AI-based model that will give you very specific tips on what to do, and how to upskill yourself. Okay, so we've kind of talked a number of things, Louise. I think we're coming to a point where let's start talking about, as an insights function, something like kind of like a roadmap, if you can think of it. Let's say somebody is running a market research, department or an insights department. What is a roadmap like? What should they be doing today to be able to, be very effective tomorrow, to win tomorrow, to do the best research, high quality research faster, give the stakeholders, the value that they expect to get in this new world. So kind of some kind of thinking around what short-term to medium-term actions. We talk about create a governance ecosystem, understand what you're doing, figure it out, define it, and then kind of go forward rather than just going blindly. But what are some other specific things in your mind that they can do?
Well, so generally with this type of situation, we would start with, again, if we think back to the kind of market research value chain, right? And every organization is going to be a little bit different in terms of what the remit of the organization is, what data sources you have, what types of business questions you're answering. So you want to look at that value chain and do the exercise of be divergent before you're convergent. So first, do the work of saying, what are all of the different use cases that I could imagine where I could leverage AI in my research and insights organization. And that could be everything from what data inputs you're bringing into it to, as we talked about before, how you're how you're developing your research approach and research content, how you're executing your research, and how you're developing insights on the back end, and kind of go through that. And then, and then you have to, with that, there's probably some organizing framework of different types of use cases, and then narrow it down to, well, where do I want to get started? And that's, usually if you think about kind of a two-dimensional, what is the potential ROI or value at stake with this on one dimension, and then another dimension would be how hard, how costly, how risky is it going to be to develop this capability, with this use case. That you can usually then narrow it down, and there could be, oftentimes companies will start with what I'll call low-hanging fruit, or what we call, which is things that they may not be the highest ROI or potential value from a dollar perspective, but it's significant enough and relatively easy to execute, relatively low cost. And that, I would include in that kind of like disruption to the organization, back to the people point. So then you want to pick a handful of those, and depending on your organizational capacity and kind of appetite for this, you might pick one thing, you might pick four things. It just kind of depends. You want to do so in a way that's thoughtful in terms of, okay, if I do this, like let's say I'm thinking about starting with automating my survey writing. Maybe I want to get to that, but I start with automating my interview guides for focus groups because that's going to be easier to do. But I know there's a path to automating many different types of writing going forward. So you kind of pick out those use cases, but thinking like there's going to be ways that I can expand these capabilities. And the few use cases that I mentioned earlier are some of the simpler ones. So it would be automating things like survey design or piece parts of surveys. It would be synthesizing long form answers on the back end. Some of the stuff in the middle around executing the research, you might have to work with third party vendors, and there can be more effort involved in kind of figuring out who to work with and how. Some organizations will want to build these capabilities internally, but at this point, probably only the largest. And so that, so again, I think the answer is going to depend on the organization, but that's sort of the process that I would go through to get started.
So let me also kind of bring in this notion of, you mentioned it, third party, applications or vendors. So let me just finish. This is going to be I think the last topic, but I'm going to set it up in a way that, so and this question also came about first party data. We are seeing a lot of micro models that are happening. Publishers or data producers are becoming very cognizant of sharing their data now with OpenAI and other such platforms. They're trying to put some guardrails around it. So in that, and then obviously in some cases they don't have the internal. So they still need to work with third parties, whether to execute with large agencies, smaller agencies, or technology. So what is your advice in that changing landscape, or also for insights functions when they are choosing to work with somebody else, especially with regarding their own data? There's also involves. What are some of the kind of guidelines that you would probably want to share with the organizations? How should they go about that decision?
Well, so two things. One you touched on, which is my view, and this is just my view, is that if we think about one of the things that will be differentiating in this world of using AI and market research and insights will be the data that informs the AI tools. And it's like, the data is the moat. So when, in thinking about how am I going to use AI, how is AI going to transform my organization? What value am I bringing to the market or to my business if I'm inside an organization as AI changes? the body of data that you're sitting on is important. And therefore, when working with any third-party vendor, you want to be careful about that, right? About what information you're sharing and what the usage rights are and that sort of thing. So that's number one. Number two, there are a lot of, and this again, this is not unique to research and insights, right? There are lots of companies, lots of startups, lots of companies coming in with different AI applications, and market research and insights is no exception. And so it's really important for vetting to vet solutions, right? To spend the time on that and not overlook it, and not because it's a bunch of people selling snake oil. I'm not suggesting that. What I'm suggesting is just that these solutions are very much emerging, and one needs to be clear about how is it that I want to use AI in my organization, and then find is there a vendor out there who's focusing on that need specifically, and not something that's like 70% aligned. It's maybe that's the best you're going to be able to do, but you really want to make sure that what they're solving for is what you want them to be solving for, but also asking questions about the quality of the solution. How are they assessing the quality, ensuring the quality? What kind of testing are they doing? And then just also, as with any alliance or partnership, right, getting to know the people there, and do you work well with them, right? Respect the people thing. So just doing the diligence is really important. And then again, when you start working with these organizations, back to the question around accuracy versus or reliability versus speed, just recognize that you don't want to bet your business on this. So this is obvious, but you probably start small. You start with something that's relatively low risk, and you figure out how to work together, and then you go from there.
So again, it's trusting an external vendor with an AI tool starts with first looking at the human who's behind the AI tool or the company. So it again goes back to sticking with the fact that human to human, that interaction is going to be key before we see whether can we trust what this is being sold, right? So so I think it's a good note to end saying that that we're not going anywhere, and our judgment and the trust that we have between people to people, like we used to do back in the days, long time ago, is still that the handshake requires you look into the eye and see whether you can trust that person to make that deal. And I think that remains still true even in the world of AI. So and I hope that people who are listening to us QuestionPro will feel the same about QuestionPro, that we that's what we do. And in fact, when I put out the checklist, people are saying externally that I've never seen a technology company putting a checklist on themselves saying you should check. We need to pass this very high standard of requirement before you should work with us. But I think it's important. The more we go into this ecosystem, I think the more important it becomes to have that trust phenomena created and established. So with that, thanks, Louise. I really appreciate your time. I hope I hope the listeners were able to pick out some interesting tools, insights, ideas, and some good feel at the end that that whilst this is happening, it's going to happen. It's going to add a lot of value. Established. It's going to add a ton of value to the GDP in the coming years. But at the same time, it needs to be governed by and trusted by humans, and should have human voice represented accurately. So with that, thank you very much. Do you have any parting or last thoughts, Louise?
I would just say, be informed, be curious, don't be afraid to experiment and try new things. If you don't do that, I think you will be left behind. I've been working in market research and insights development for 20 years, and I think this is the most exciting thing that's happened in those 20 years. So I think it's going to be, it's actually going to lead to a renaissance in the role of research and insights in organizations. And so.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, we did not talk about the upside, significant upside, the value of the quality of insights. I think we should do one more on that, as well as some use cases, how it has created new ideas and new insights that serves customers better. So that's good way to end, I think. Thanks, Louise. Appreciate it.
All right. Nice to see you, Sumair.
All right. Cheers. Bye.